we have learned that a point is a place on a line, a specific place on a line. We have learned that a line goes on forever and ever, and a line segment ends with 2 points, and it's just a piece of a line. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about angles. To talk about angles, first we need to know what a ray is. A ray is a part of a line that only has one endpoint. The rest of it goes on forever and ever. When I think of a ray, I like to think of a flashlight because it's got an endpoint. That's where you turn on the flashlight. And then the rays of light just go on forever and ever. Our Simon Says movement for this would be, we would make a fist at the end to show an end point, but then we'd make a flat hand on the other side to show it goes on forever and ever. When two rays have the same end point, it becomes an angle, and the end point is called the vertex of an angle. Our Simon Says action for angle would be, we would put our arms up like we're showing our muscles, and we make an angle with our elbows. Our Simon Says action for vertex, if I asked what a vertex was, would be you would make the same action for angle, except then you would point to your elbow because that's the vertex. That's the end point for those two lines, is your elbow. So that's our Simon Says movement for the vertex. In geometry, we like to measure angles. And when we measure angles, we talk about the openness of that angle. How open is that angle? How much space does it have? When we measure angles, we refer to it in 3 different ways. The first way that we measure angles is we see if it is a right angle. A right angle makes a square corner. That means it's straight up and it's straight across. We would call this perpendicular lines because it would make a square corner. Here's an example that I found of a square corner. Here are the windows, and if you look, every angle makes a square corner. So that means that each of these angles are right angles. Our Simon Says action for a right angle is you just hold your hand up and you make an L. That's your right angle. We use this right angle as a reference point because then we look to see if an angle is bigger or smaller than a right angle. If I were to make a pretend right angle right here, I could see that this angle right here is going to be smaller because it's less open than a right angle. We call these acute angles. And I look at the word cute because it's a smaller angle than a right angle, so I say, oh, it's a cute angle because it's so small. Some examples that I found of acute angles are this flag pole right here. It's smaller than a right angle, so it would be an acute angle. And then we say, hi, Mr. Walker. And then another example of acute angle is this doorway right here. It wasn't open all the way, and it was smaller than a right angle, so we would call this an acute angle. Our Simon Says action for acute angle is we make a peace sign because it is smaller than our right angle that we made into an L. And if you look, it's smaller. It's an acute angle. So when I say acute angle, you make a peace sign. Our last angle that we use is an obtuse angle. And once again, I'm going to use my right triangle as an example. Here it is. And I can see that the openness of my angle, it's more than a right angle. So we call this obtuse. Some examples of an obtuse angle would be this stapler right here when it's opened up. Because if you look, it is more than a right angle, so we would call that an obtuse angle. And then I went and I looked at the shadow and I saw that it was just a little bit more than a right triangle, So that's also an obtuse angle. Our Simon Says action for obtuse angle is when you make the hang loose sign with your hand. You stick out your thumb and you stick out your pinky, because what it does is it makes an obtuse angle. It's more than a right triangle. And if you're in Hawaii, you shake your hand and you say hang loose. And so how we remember that is we say hang loose obtuse. And it's a little bit bigger than a right triangle, right angle. When we measure an angle, we measure the openness of an angle. If it makes a square angle, we call it a right angle. If it's less than a right angle, we call it a cute angle because it's adorable. And if it's bigger than a right angle, we call it an obtuse angle. What are some angles you can find around the classroom or around the school? Keep your eyes open today.